Carl Jung's warning, why working until 65 leaves you empty. Have you ever stopped and really thought about what we're all aiming for? The plan seems simple: work hard, stay on the track, climb the ladder, retire at 65, and then finally start living. But why is that the script? Who wrote it? And why do so many of us follow it without ever asking the most important question: what if it's a lie? Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers in modern psychology, warned us about this silent danger, not through loud proclamations, but through deep insights into the human psyche. He didn't just study people, he studied souls. And what he saw was devastating: people reaching the end of their careers, their lives even, and realizing they had spent decades playing a role that wasn't theirs. And by the time they woke up, it was too late. We live in a world obsessed with productivity. From the moment we enter school, we're conditioned to think of ourselves as future workers, not creators, not seekers, not questioners. We're taught to measure our worth by our output. Grades become salaries, homework becomes deadlines, and slowly, imperceptibly, we forget that life was ever about anything else. Jung saw this happening in his time. He saw people disconnecting from meaning, from mystery, from the parts of themselves that don't fit on a spreadsheet. And he called it what it was: a spiritual crisis. Let's break this down. You spend your 20s learning how to be useful. You pick a career path, often based on societal pressure or parental approval, not inner calling. You enter the workforce, and suddenly your identity is fused with your job title. You say, "I'm an engineer," or "I'm a teacher," and people nod with recognition, but inside, something feels off. As the years go by, your days become structured around performance, deadlines, promotions. And in the background, a quiet voice starts to whisper, "Is this it?" But you don't listen. You're too busy. You tell yourself, "I'll figure it out later, after the next raise, after the kids grow up, after retirement." After retirement. You keep pushing the real questions into the future. And then one day you retire.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
You've arrived at the promised land, freedom at last. No more meetings, no more alarms, no more pretending. But then something strange happens. You don't feel free, you feel lost. You realize you don't know who you are without the work. All the years you spent becoming somebody have left you without a self. This is what Jung warned us about: the collapse of identity that comes when we've over-identified with our social persona and neglected the soul. Jung believed that the first half of life is about building the ego, establishing a place in the world. But the second half, that's where the real journey begins. That's when we're supposed to turn inward to begin the process of individuation, discovering who we really are beneath all the masks. But society doesn't prepare us for that. It trains us to keep performing, even when the stage is collapsing. And when the spotlight fades, we're left in the dark, confused, scared, and alone. This isn't just theoretical. Look around. How many people do you know who retire and fall into depression, illness, or restlessness? How many try to fill the void with distractions, TV, hobbies, even more work, because they don't know how to just be? They've never met their deeper self. They've spent so long chasing external validation that the idea of inner exploration feels alien. But it's not their fault. We've created a culture that celebrates the hustle and ignores the soul. Here's the question: What are we sacrificing in our blind loyalty to the 40-year work model? What parts of ourselves are we leaving behind in the name of career success? And what happens when the applause stops and there's no one left to impress? Jung said that a meaningful life isn't something we find, it's something we create. But creation requires reflection. It requires silence. It requires the courage to look within and ask, who am I when no one's watching? Most of us never get there, not because we can't, but because we've been told that work is the highest form of purpose. And yet, deep down, we know that's not enough. We know there's something more. So the real warning here isn't just about retirement. It's about now. It's about waking up before it's too late. It's about reclaiming your inner life before society convinces you to trade it away for a pension and a gold watch. Because the truth is, if you wait until 65 to start living, you might find there's nothing left to live from. But the great substitution, why society replaces meaning with achievement, there's a quiet tragedy unfolding all around us, and most of us are too distracted to notice it. It's the slow erosion of meaning, replaced with the constant pursuit of achievement. We've been sold a brilliant illusion that if we just accomplish enough, earn enough, prove enough, we'll feel whole. But wholeness isn't something you win. It's something you remember. And that remembering is exactly what society has trained us to forget. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He saw that modern people were losing touch with symbols, myths, and rituals, the ancient tools that once gave life depth and dimension. In their place, we've erected a shrine to productivity. We worship at the altar of the to-do list. The question we ask ourselves subconsciously every day is not who am I becoming, but what have I done? And if the answer isn't measurable, if it can't be tracked or monetized, we feel like we've failed. But here's the philosophical catch: achievement is always external. It's always about doing. Meaning, on the other hand, is internal. It's about being. And when we confuse the two, we spend our lives climbing ladders that are leaning against the wrong walls. We chase titles, trophies, and social validation, hoping they'll fill the emptiness inside. But they never do, because the soul doesn't speak the language of status. The soul speaks in symbols, in dreams, and in silence, in longing. Jung warned that if we don't pursue meaning, we become neurotic. And look around, how many of us are living high-functioning lives on the outside but feel lost, anxious, or hollow on the inside. That's not a personal failure. That's the natural result of a culture that substitutes meaning with achievement and then tells you it's your fault if you feel unfulfilled. Let's go deeper. From a young age, we're taught to define ourselves by what we do. What do you want to be when you grow up? Becomes the central question, as if our essence is synonymous with a job title. And so we internalize the idea that our worth is conditional, that it depends on what we can produce. We become human doings instead of human beings. And every time we achieve something, we get a brief hit of validation. But it fades, and we need the next one, and the next. Until one day we wake up and realize we've built an entire identity on accomplishments that have nothing to do with our true self. This is what Jung called living from the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society. The persona isn't inherently bad, it's necessary. But the danger comes when we mistake the mask for the face. When we become so identified with our external roles that we forget there's a deeper self underneath, a self that is not defined by what it achieves, but by what it experiences, but creates and feels. So what's the alternative? It starts with asking better questions. Instead of what can I achieve today, ask what gives me life today. Instead of how can I be more productive, ask what is asking to be expressed through me. These are not easy questions. They don't lead to neat answers, but they lead somewhere more important, inward. We must reclaim the lost art of meaning-making. That might look like journaling, not to track goals, but to explore inner landscapes. It might look like walking in nature and listening, not for answers, but for echoes of the self. It might look like creating art, not for an audience, but because your soul aches to speak. These are not luxuries. They are necessities, because without them, we're just machines, efficient, impressive, and utterly disconnected. So here's the challenge. What if you stopped defining yourself by what you've done and started defining yourself by what you've discovered? What if your greatest achievement isn't out there in the world, but buried deep within, waiting to be uncovered? Because meaning isn't something society gives you. It's something you must reclaim. Midlife as a portal, Jung's secret to transforming emptiness into purpose. At some point, often quietly and without warning, a shift begins. You reach a certain age, maybe 35, maybe 45, maybe 55, and something starts to feel off. The goals that once lit you up feel hollow. The career that consumed you begins to lose its grip. The achievements you once thought would bring fulfillment have started to feel like decorations on an empty house. And that's when a question begins to whisper through the noise. Is this all there is? Carl Jung called this moment the beginning of the second half of life. And he believed it wasn't a crisis, it was a calling, a threshold, a portal. But in modern society, we don't see it that way. We call it a midlife crisis. We treat it like a breakdown, something to avoid, hide, or medicate. But Jung saw it as a breakthrough. He believed that the first half of life is meant to build the ego, to establish ourselves in the world. But the second half, that's when the real work begins. That's when we're invited to turn inward and ask the deeper questions we were too busy, too afraid, or too distracted to face before. But here's the paradox. The very tools that helped you succeed in the first half of life, the ambition, the discipline, the striving, can become the very barriers to your transformation. Because the second half of life isn't about building. It's about unbuilding. It's about peeling away the layers of identity you've constructed and asking, what's underneath all this? Who am I if I'm not my job, my role, my accomplishments? Jung didn't see this as a collapse. He saw it as individuation, the process of becoming whole. It's not about self-improvement, it's about self-discovery. It's not about fixing yourself, it's about integrating the parts of you that you've exiled, your emotions, your dreams, your shadow. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the shadow isn't just your flaws, it's also your unlived life, the parts of you that were never allowed to exist because they didn't fit the narrative. And confronting that can feel like death, the death of who you thought you were. But isn't that what transformation really is? A death and a rebirth. Jung believed that midlife is the soul's invitation to stop performing and start becoming. And yet, most of us run from it. We buy things. We chase youth. We distract ourselves with noise. Because silence is terrifying when you've spent your life avoiding your own voice. So what does it actually look like to walk through this portal? It might begin with restlessness, a sense that your life no longer fits. Then come the questions. Maybe you return to books you loved as a child. Maybe you start dreaming again, literally and metaphorically. And those dreams carry messages, symbols, clues. Maybe you feel pulled toward nature, toward solitude, toward meaning-making. These are not signs of regression. They are signs of awakening. The ego sees them as threats, but the soul sees them as homecoming. This journey doesn't have a map. It's not linear. It doesn't promise success, but it promises something far more valuable: authenticity. And with authenticity comes peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of alignment. When your outer life starts to reflect your inner truth. So here's the question: are you brave enough to let go of who you've been in order to become who you really are? Can you walk away from the performance, even if it means being misunderstood, even if it means starting over? Because midlife isn't the end. It's the beginning of the life you were always meant to live. But it requires courage. The courage to descend into your own depths, to meet the parts of you that never got to speak, and to listen. Jung left us with this truth: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Midlife is the door. The question is, will you walk through it? The final return: how to live before you die. Eventually, all journeys bring us back to the beginning. But when we return, we're not the same. That's the essence of Jung's final insight, and perhaps the most profound. After the striving, the building, the achieving, and the unlearning, we are brought face to face with the ultimate question: how do I live before I die? Not just survive, not just function, but live deeply, consciously, and truthfully. Most people never ask this question until it's too late. They wait until the diagnosis, the loss, the silence of retirement. They wait until death brushes their shoulder to finally see clearly. But Jung challenged us to ask it now, to live with mortality in view, not as a fear, but as a guide. Because death, when faced honestly, doesn't shrink life. It sharpens it. It reminds us what matters. It strips away the trivial and leaves only the essential. So what is essential? It's not your resume, not your bank account, not your trophies. It's the relationships you've built, the moments you've been fully present, the times you've created something beautiful, not for profit, but for love. It's the laughter, the tears, the courage to follow a voice inside you that no one else could hear. That is living. Jung believed that when we neglect the soul, we don't just suffer, we become strangers to ourselves. But when we turn toward the soul, when we honor its language, symbols, dreams, intuition, we begin to recover something sacred. Not certainty, but aliveness. Not control, but depth. And in that depth, we begin to live not as someone chasing life, but as someone inhabiting it. But this is the final return, not to society's script, but to your original self, the self that existed before you were named, labeled, and molded. The self that knew how to wander, how to play, how to love without fear of being enough. Living before you die means living now, not waiting for permission, not chasing someday. It means saying what needs to be said, doing what your soul has been asking you to do. It means paying attention to the small things, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of your breath, the presence of someone you love. Because the small things, they're not small. They're the whole thing. So here's the question that no one can answer for you. If you had 1 year to live, not in fear, but in truth, what would you change? And why are you waiting? The invisible lie is that life starts after the work is done. Jung shattered that illusion. He showed us that the real work is not what we do for a living, but how we choose to live. And the real tragedy isn't dying. It's never having really lived. So don't wait until 65 to meet yourself. Don't wait until retirement to start asking the only question that matters. Who are you really? And what will you do with the time you have left?